Hey there, and welcome back to my game dev series. In this video, I'm going to continue working on the battle screen that I started kind of putzing around with the other night. I had tried to implement the message box component in the battle screens, but I've decided that I'm not going to do that. Mainly because if you look here, a lot of what the message box is doing is trying to maintain pagination state. So paginating, showing pagination icon, and yes, no dialogue, which I'm probably not going to need. Start index, pagination index, last pagination index, again, pagination stuff. And then total lines and showing lines that, again, you have to use those to calculate whether or not you should be paginating. So in light of that being the case, I'm going to, at this point, keep the battle component as if it's kind of a self-contained mini application. So it's going to handle its own key presses. It's going to do its own rendering and keep its own internal state. And I think that should work well enough for my purposes right now, and if I need to abstract stuff out later, I can do that, definitely. But right now, I don't really see a purpose to that. So if I run what I have right now, let me jump into a battle. You can see I have the semblance of a background image, just kind of a big wooded area. I have the player and the enemy, and then I have just some introductory text about what's going to happen. And basically, like I said in my previous video, all of the text-based stuff, so choosing attacks, and then saying what's happening, is going to be down here in this black area. And so I don't really need an outline of a message box or anything like that. I can just arbitrarily position stuff within this area as I want it to be. So inside our battle component, in the render function, you can see this condition for if we're doing the screen wipe, which clears it to black, it'll render that stuff. If not, then we get our background to render. And what that looks like is just this texture that I can, of course, tile either direction, I suppose. So that gets tiled on the x-axis. And yeah, I mean, that basically gets arbitrarily positioned to some extent. So we're calculating how many times we need to tile that. I believe it ends up being about 4 in this instance, maybe 5. The height, that just ends up being 0 to be at the top of the screen. And then we just render that in a loop, and that loop is what's going to do the tiling there. And then same with player and enemy, we just kind of hard code the positions for those. So for the height, I want it to kind of overlap the background tiles. So I just do a Y position of the background height minus, tile size times 2.5. So that'll move it upward a little bit onto that tiled background. And then for the X position of my player, I'm finding the center of the window, and then I'm moving him to the left about 1.5 tiles. So that's what's going to give you the space between the player and the enemy. So here we have the enemy rendering, again getting the middle of the window and then adding here, so we move him to the right 1.5 tiles. And then of course here we can render the text as we need. So right now, since I have showing intro, is true, that's just going to show the mangled skeleton appears text. And I think really quickly I wanted to show what I did in Photoshop to be able to make that background tile. So really the first thing that I did was I got my tree and I scaled that up. That was in objects. So if I increase this, basically we had that single texture. I tend to delete the white background because that's not needed. And then in my image size, I made it not constrain proportions because I do want to kind of make it taller than it is wide in this case. So I think I put the height at 256 maybe. I don't recall what the width ended up being, but let's just go with 100 for right now, just for sake of demonstration. And down here you have some resampling functions that you can use. And I selected nearest neighbor, which, as you can see, preserves the hard edges. And we get something kind of tall and wide like that. What I ended up doing then is pasting that into a new document here. Again, deleting the background. Moved that all the way over to the side. And then I put a second tree kind of behind like that, and a third tree pretty close to it like that. And with the second one, I actually ended up offsetting it a little bit, kind of bumping it upward. And with the second middle tree as well, I ended up adjusting the hue and saturation a little bit to kind of darken it. Tidge. And I merged those layers together. Do a little bit more adjustments on the hue and saturation there, just to darken the whole thing overall. Great. So to be able to tile this, you don't just want to take the whole thing here, because that's gonna give you kind of an interesting effect. So let me just show you what that looks like. If I tile that as it is right now, you get this funny gap there, and if you want that, fine, but I don't really. So what you do is you take half of the first tree and then half of the second one, and you copy that. So if I wipe all of this and I paste in that segment, move those over, you can see I get a nice tiling effect here of complete trees. So that's basically what I did for my tree background. Along with that, I also put a gradient behind it, so if I merge these down, I select my gradient tool. That's not the correct one. We want a solid gradient. So it'll have blue on the top and black on the bottom. We do something kind of like that. And then, I put some of the dirt texture at the bottom as well and faded that off into black as well. So nothing too complex. It's a little jaggedy looking, but for right now, it's kind of a nice fill-in texture, I would say. Let me run this again, and we'll look at what we want to do next. So next, I think I want to have some visual display of the character's health bar and then the enemy's health bar, maybe. Just so we don't have to have like a textual representation of that down here. I don't know the best place to put that. I mean, I know a lot of games have like a hovering health bar up above, but my little guys are so small right now. If I increased their size, which I could viably do in time, maybe then you could have a health bar above them. But for right now, I think I'm just going to put it back behind either one, just to get something on the screen and working. And conveniently, I do already have some health bar code that I have been using. That is up in the status bar. So we'll kind of see what that is doing right now. So we have the health bar border, and then we have the health bar inside, which the inside, of course, changes based on the overall health of the player. We have a health bar icon. I think I'm going to not render the icon for right now. I think it'll be fairly obvious what you're looking at. So let me just, for right now, copy this, and we can look at a way to make this somewhat generic. Well, first let's just kind of paste this in here. So this probably will not stay hard-coded in the render function, but just to see it in action, why don't we try that? So this is the border. And that's the inside. So position X for the border, that's here. I need to, we're leveraging the position SDL struct that I have set before, just so I don't need to make a new one, but we can set that to basically whatever we want it to be. So let's just set that to tile size. Set to tile size. So that'll be one tile over from the left of the screen for right now. Position Y. We'll keep position Y as whatever it is right now. So I'll comment that out, and we'll see what that comes out as. So the width, I had that as tile size times 3, so that'll take up 3 blocks of space for a width, and we're adding 2 on that, so that'll be basically 1 pixel on each side for a border. Then for the height, That's tile size, so that's half a tile height. And the border is light gray, and we just render that as a rectangle. Non-filled rectangle, I believe. So to draw the inside, we increase the X and Y just to offset it to the right and down by 1 pixel. And we get the health percentage from the player health divided by 100. That's how you get a percentage, of course. We set the width accordingly. And the height set to -2 for some reason, or -=2. I'm not sure. I don't recall exactly what that was for, but we will find out here in a second. Let's just run that and see what happens. Okay, so you can see that we have a health bar here. Let's see about moving it over a bit and maybe down a little bit. Maybe adjusting the size just a smidgen. So let's make it 2 blocks wide. Here, I'm going to set a variable for that. Since we'll be using that in a couple places here. Maybe, maybe not. So health bar width. Oh, yeah, we do right here. Okay. And then we want to move it to the right a little bit. So that was the X position. Let's just arbitrarily move it over 3. And the Y position, let's see what that does. Really just kind of fiddling with values at this point to get things where I want them to be. That's lower than I want, but the size seems to be a little bit more manageable. So move it 5 tiles over. I don't know that I necessarily want to rely on what the Y position was before. So let's get the position of the background height, or let's get the background height and move it up, say 10 from that. See what that gives us. We might want to move it up more, we'll see. Yeah, we want to move that up a lot more. So tile size times 2. Yeah, that's getting pretty good. Maybe 2.5. Move it away from the player just a little bit there. I don't know. Just kind of making things up here. Just, you know. It goes how it goes. I'm not doing any exacting math. Just kind of playing. It's like Bob Ross with code. If only I could correlate that to myself. I like that. That's good. We'll go with that. Now if I kind of bump the player health down, by 50. Oh, that just shot off the screen. Oops. Wow. Okay. Here, let's let me see what's going on. Oh, no. I know what's happening. Sorry, I don't need to see that stuff. What's happening is that this is happening. This is in a loop, so we can't do minus equals, or else it's going to keep decrementing that by 50 each iteration, and that's a lot of iterations because this renders pretty quickly. So, okay, that should be, yeah, there's 50% health. And maybe we can make this bar even a little bit skinnier. So like height be tile size divided by 3. That needs to be casted to an integer, I believe, anyway. Or maybe that'll happen automatically. I don't know. I mean, position.h is going to have to be an integer by nature. So I don't know if it handles that conversion implicitly, but we'll put that in there. Let's see what happens. Yep, that looks good. I like that. Now we'll want to do the same thing for the enemy, but before we can even do that, there's the problem that we don't have an enemy to associate like the health with, right? But even beyond that, we probably want to take this stuff and wrap that into a function that we can call and then pass in various like positions and even the health itself. So let's just copy this out, or cut that, I guess, and then we'll call that display health bar. I don't know what parameters that's going to need offhand, but we'll add those in as we go. So I guess we can see some things. We need a width. So we'll pass that in. Now I need a position X. And I'll just spell it out because that's how I do things. That's going to be this. Or we could just do a point int. Position. Yeah, let's do that. So then we get types point int x equals that, position y is this, pass that guy in. I need to initialize that inside this function actually. So width, we know how to get that. Height, times 2 is width. Position. Sorry, I'm just kind of thinking through this a little bit. So that's, yeah, we'll keep that as it is. We'll just keep it as light gray. I think that's fine. So the inside, these will stay the same. So we need to pass in an entity health. Int health. So in this case, it's state player.health. So that just becomes health. Percent. Render red or orange or green. Render that. So we should be good with that as a kind of a mild abstraction, I believe. still good. All right. Now we can put in an enemy one. Like I said, we don't have an enemy yet. So we'll just say enemy health equals 100 because that would make sense starting out a battle. Width is going to stay the same. Why am I actually passing in width again? Just because we wanted to, I guess. Yeah, I suppose just to change that in the future if we ever wanted to. So position, we can kind of leverage that again. So position x equals, what we want to do here is get the right side of the window. So window tiles times tile size minus that 4.5 tiles that we did for the player. And position y is going to arguably be the same thing that we already have it at. So we can do display health bar with position enemy health. And we'll see what that gets us. That's closer. I think that we'll move that over one more block and see what happens. I knew things were a little bit off with my character positions, but that's okay. Let me call this 5 for right now. And we might even need to bump that up a little bit more depending. Yeah, let's just call that maybe 5.5 or 6. Hopefully not 6.5, but I'm going to test it. Half a tile size each or every time, just so I can annoy myself and everybody else. That's close. Let's see what 6 looks like quick. So it might be 5.5 plus or minus 6. I mean, that's just really arbitrary at that point. And I guess I don't need pixel perfect positioning because I'm sure I'll be adjusting things as I go. For the sake of argument here, let's just see what that looks like. We'll go with that for right now. I like that. Okie dokie. Now, what I think I need to do after that is create a function that I can spawn an enemy with. And the player and the enemy, they both need to have a couple attributes, I suppose. So they of course already have health, but I would also like them to have defense, There needs to be a random multiplier just so you can get some variability in attacks and defense levels. Probably also something like speed or agility. And then I suppose that could be just a good starting point with those. So let me look at my player to start out with. And I did move actors and kind of objects into this entities folder just to kind of clean up the directory a little bit. There's still a lot in there, but it helps me a little bit because I know anytime I'm looking at like an object definition that'll be displayed on screen. Object, not like an object-oriented, I mean like game object. That'll be in here. So the player has this stuff. Health is here. What I think might be beneficial is if I make a new struct and call that something like battle stats or something like that. Just because the player as well as the enemies will all have those various attributes, and so you might as well wrap those into one thing so you don't have to, program those into every kind of object here. So let's go down to our types file. We'll find player. So right here we have health. So if I pull that out, make a struct, we'll just call it battle stats. And we'll put our health in there. I also said I wanted defense. Let's call it speed. And I had been working on kind of a little simulator. I don't think I have that pulled up right now, but I can again. So I kind of rebuilt this a little bit since the last time that I showed it, if I even did. I thought, why not make a nice UI for it? But still, you can spawn the enemies, and then you can do various attacks, kind of see how the battles play out. And here I have agility, but that's the same as speed. Then I had luck. I thought that could be an interesting factor. So luck. One thing about these is I don't necessarily know that I want them to be floats. I'm going to set those to integers for right now. I don't think there's much of a reason to have those as floating points. So we'll go with that. And then player gets some stats. I probably need to put this up above the player, actually. Now, any place that we have player.health, we will need to kind of adjust that. Can you do that? I don't know if that works or not. You don't need to name it. So it comes after wood, correct? Wood score stats. So we need to move this to the bottom as such. And this is, let's just call it battle stats. You can just call it stats, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't matter that much. I'll call it stats. So that has health, which will be 100, and then defense, speed, and luck. Defense over here, I think I had that at 15. Speed, I had at 15. And luck, I had at 35. So we'll keep those. And then any place that I had player.health, I need to update those references. So it becomes state player.stats.health. And we'll see if that still compiles. Health is not a member of types player T, so battle CPP. Helps if I save the file. So we'll run that, and we're still good. Okay, so now for an enemy, what we can do is in our battle, we will have an enemy. So types. An enemy is going to have a name. So standard string name. It's going to have battle stats, and it'll probably have an unordered map of string keys and integers which apply to attacks. And so an attack will have a name as well as an int, or maybe that should be a float, I don't know. We'll call that a float. Unordered map. Here. Let me see if it likes that or not. Kaboom. Semicolons help. Stats unknown override specifier times 59. Yeah. Helps if you do things correctly. It's like I'm so used to other languages where you're using commas instead of semicolons within, you know, a structure and array. So in our battle, yeah, we want to have an instance of an enemy struct. And then we want a function to generate an enemy when the battle starts. So what do we call that before? Mangled skeleton. So enemy stats, health is 100, enemy stats, defense, what am I starting that out at here? That does get slightly randomly generated, so I will have to build that in as well. But to start with, speed is 14, luck equals 17. We want to call this as well kind of at the start of the battle, which that kind of happens more or less in this update function. So if not in battle, we don't really do anything. Screen wipe. Else. So this is kind of where we kick off the battle. So I'm going to generate an enemy right there. Let's put it at 50% health just to test out how things look. It'd be interesting to kind of make a way to display the enemy stats on screen somehow, like if you press a button or maybe just have them up somehow anyway, or maybe like DSL, like D13S14L17. I don't know how to display those. They could maybe be under the health bar. I don't know if that'd be an elegant solution or not. His health is not at 50%. That's because we still have that hard-coded. Right. Enemy health. This is enemy stats health. And that's pretty off too. Let's see what happens when we adjust the player health again. Right, we hard-coded it around here. So let's just comment that line out. 65, I don't know. No, those are both kind of botched up here. But if I had it at 100, it was working, wasn't it? Yeah, that's interesting. So 100 works, anything less than that just nukes it completely. Okay. That means our display health bar is incorrect. I have health as an int. I don't know if making it a float would work any better. Health percent, yeah, that's probably related. Here was our enemy health and stuff. Not sure if that will have fixed it, but we can give it a shot. Oh, that did. Well, that's good. Yeah, int versus float. That's a very important distinction there, of course. So we can return this back to what it was. And put our enemy health back at 100. I think what I want to do is I'd like to find a little font that I can use to display the stats beneath the health bar. So what I want to do is position Y. I want to bump those up. Let's call it 2.5. I don't know how much space I'm going to need, though. That could do to start, maybe. If I do like a white font, I think you'll see it just fine. So it'll be like D, S, and L, maybe. This is going to get a little bit dodgy, but I'd kind of like to see those stats just for testing purposes. Otherwise, it'll be kind of difficult to see like what type of randomly generated stats I'm getting for my enemies. I know what my player is going to be because those are essentially going to be hard-coded to start with, but the enemy, that needs to not be hard-coded. So here, how about in my next video, I go through the process of how I implement different fonts in the game. I will pick one out so nobody has to watch me wade through endless amounts of fonts for an hour. And then we'll generate the glyph map, we'll generate the static header, and then we'll get that displaying the stats. So hopefully this was interesting to you, and we'll see you again in the next video.